There we go. In case you didn't.
There we go.
You don't have to announce it.
Yeah. Okay, welcome everybody for the August 5 miles from anywhere meeting. This month, we're delighted to have Nancy Holder as our speaker. He's going to give a nice talk on Sherlockian parody. Before we get to that, though, I just want to kind of just do our little announcement start to the group, and then we'll get going. So here's our agendas, announcements. We'll get the talk on Sherlockian parody. Excited to see that the author of the story we read, His Last Flower, Mikkel, is with us today. So that's awesome. We'll talk a little bit about Baking Street in general in a minute too, because we have a lot of the contributors to the book here. So I can give a little talk about that too. But to start with, just a little thing that we really are 5 miles from anywhere. So last month, Brian and I, actually, I guess it was 2 months ago, it was in June, were able to meet up with Anna, who's down there, with the Monadnock Sherlockians in Keene, New Hampshire. And we're delighted. We gave a little talk there, but it was really cool to meet with one-on-one with one of our 5 miles members. I came in from Colorado and was able to meet with them in New Hampshire. So that was really fun. And Anna, I hope you're okay with this, but I just had to show off her amazing bathroom. This is her bathroom. It is the Sherlockian throne. It is so cool.
I like that name.
The Sherlockian throne.
There we go. She has a delightful house, beautiful old house with numbers of cool, like Harry Potter rooms and Sherlock Holmes rooms and all sorts of just amazing things. But absolutely loved seeing this, and it was very exciting. It was really cool to meet with the New Hampshire group, and we met outside and all wore masks and had a really nice time. So it was great. Everyone felt very safe. Cool.
Yeah, it was wonderful having you and Brian. It's great. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we'll have to do that again sometime.
That was awesome. Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Cool. I see this in the chat. People are commenting on how awesome it looks, Anna. So that's cool to see as well. All right. Okay. Just an update. I wanted to say thank you to everybody. In June, I gave my talk on a study in combat, on an essay I was working on for the Essential Sherlock Holmes, which Dan Andriaco is editing, and with your feedback, I did edit it, and it has been accepted and will be in, he's not sure if it's going to be in the second or third volume, but it will be in that particular book. So thank you all for that. And then 2 members I do not think are with us asked me to announce. Tom Burns wanted to announce that his next book, Killers, an Ally McMaster's mystery, I believe goes live on Amazon on Tuesday. It's not a Sherlock Holmes book, but as you know, Tom spoke with us. His work was in The Strand. He wrote a Sherlock Holmes story. He's written a number of stories, so definitely inspired by Holmes. And then David Markham wanted us to know that his Sherlock Holmes and the Eye of Hecate is on Kickstarter. It's got, I think, a bit less than a week left. It's doing really well. But if you want really awesome traditional Sherlock Holmes, you can't get better than David. And he's got a novel on there right now. It's going to be followed by a 5-volume collection of all of his Holmes stories. He's now written more than Doyle. So it's pretty cool. All right, any other announcements from the group on anything?
Yes.
What's up?
According to Baring Gould, today is Dr. Watson's birthday.
Oh, that's right. That is correct. Happy birthday, Watson. Excellent.
Dr. Watson.
Yes.
Cheers.
Excellent. Happy birthday. What a perfect time to have our meeting. Steve, thanks for posting the link to David's Kickstarter in there too. So happy birthday, Watson. All right, anything else to share with the group at the moment? Any other announcements? Everyone staying healthy and safe, I'm hoping. As best you can, right?
Not easy in Alabama.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
Cool. All right. So before we get to the talk for today, I just have to talk a little about this book. So the talk comes from Sherlock Holmes of Baking Street, which was put together by Nancy and by Margie Deck. Margie, who you may know her as the Pocky Puzzler, who wrote for the John H. Watson Society for a number of years, put this. They came to Brian and me with this crazy idea of a book. To be honest with you, I mean, I don't think there's any other Sherlock Holmes book in the world like this one.
No.
And pretty much Margie had writer's block, and Nancy, correct me if I'm wrong on the story. I'm kind of going with what Margie had told me, and she had put something online about maybe like there should be some book about Sherlock Holmes and baking. And Robert Parrott, who has also spoken to our group, one of our first pastiche authors actually, wrote to her and said, well, why don't you put an anthology together of Sherlock Holmes and baking? And she was like, I don't know about that. But then she thought about it and thought maybe it'd be a good idea. And she contacted Nancy, and they kind of went with it. And they kind of just created this very cool book. And if you haven't seen it yet, I mean, it's got everything, everything in it. It's got parody in it. It's got some recipes in it. It's got Les Klinger writes a wonderful introduction where he gives like a history of Baker Street. It's a very cool book, and if you have a chance to read it, it's cool. And all of the proceeds are donated to the Beacon Society, which is the Sherlock Holmes teaching group that gives scholarships to teachers and to libraries to get Sherlock Holmes books and to introduce the next generation to the Holmes characters. So if you get a chance, it's awesome. Okay. I'm just going to stop sharing just for a second because I want to see how many here were in the book Baking Street. Okay, it's like I was in it, Jay was, Mikhail, of course, they're reading your story today. Robin, were you in it, Robin?
Yes.
Yes.
Very honestly
as
said.
well. Bridget was in it as well. So a number of us were in it that are here today. And so it's like a little mini reunion, I guess, or first time gathering, I guess, of the Baking Street crew, because we met online. Okay.
Well, I guess now I have to buy it because I know all these people.
There you go, Larry.
There you go.
Absolutely.
That's the way it goes.
So I'm sure as the discussion goes on after Nancy's talk, we'll talk more about the contributors. Maybe we can each say a little bit about our piece too in the book, because it was, yeah, I honestly, Brian and I were just like, we've never seen anything like this. It's so cool. All right. But let me go back and let me let me share my screen one more time. Because I do want to give Nancy a proper introduction. Okay, so Nancy Holder is in the Baker Street Irregulars with the name Beryl Garcia. She's a New York Times best-selling author and an editor. She has won the Bram Stoker Award 5 times. That is pretty darn impressive. Okay, and was named the 2019 Grand Master by the International Association of Media Tie-In Writers. Okay, so she writes a lot of movie tie-ins. She's written original novels and short fiction material for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Hellboy, other properties, and she novelized the Wonder Woman film, which I gotta say, amazing, and Crimson Peak. Her Sherlockian fiction includes the Unsolved Cases of Sherlock Holmes, which is an online storytelling game for Storium. She's written pastiches and comic books for Moonstone Books. Her articles about Holmes have appeared in the Baker Street Journal and Penumbra, a journal of weird fiction and criticism. She's the writer on Mary Shelley Presents, a comic book series from Chimera Press, member of several societies, Sound of the Baskervilles, Society of London, John H. Watson Society. You know, I could go on and on and on. I mean, she's just this amazing woman, and we are just delighted to have her as our guest today. So let's I'm going to stop sharing so we can give a round of applause to Nancy. And I will get her PowerPoint up here, and then we can get started. Cool.
Nice.
Hopefully I do a better job on the PowerPoint today than I did when poor Brian went a few months ago. I kept
Oh, that
making
was fine.
these issues, so let's go on. There we go. All right, and just, okay. All right, I'm just, everybody, if you might want to mute yourself, so Nancy has the floor to give her a nice talk, okay? All right, Nancy, I think you're good.
Okay, hi everybody. I've made a command decision, seeing how many Brits are in the room, that when I read McKellay's story, I'm not imitating Sherlock Holmes as an Irish American or an English person. So I'm dumping that. It's a command decision. I'm so happy to be here today, and thank you for coming, even though there's so much competition in the Sherlockian webverse today. So without further ado, let me gush over the genius of Michele Lopez and Sherlock, and I'll talk about Sherlockian parody. This is really my excuse to gush over Michele, so that next time I go to Italy, he'll invite me over to his house, or we can go out. So what is a parody? A parody, next slide, please, Derek. A parody is a work that's created by imitating an existing original work in order to make fun of or comment on an aspect of the original. Parodies can target celebrities, politicians, authors, a style or trend, or any other interesting subject. So what would that entail? Next slide, please, Derek. A parody is an imitation with a twist. In other words, a good parody is a humorous or ironic imitation of its source. So this is different from a comedy or something that's based on existing characters that's supposed to be funny in itself. So context is the most important thing in parody. And the way that we develop context is that everybody knows what the context is. I was looking at some old videos of Johnny Carson, who used to be a late night talk show host, and he would stop and he would do these things that weren't funny to me, because I don't know why it's funny. He would go, his associate, his sidekick would go like, hey-oh, and everybody would start laughing. I thought, why are they laughing? It's the context. So the fact that we are all Sherlockians is what makes Michele's story so much funnier to us. So just as an aside, because I love to smash stuff on my slides, this is a picture of Holmes as Altamont on the Collier's version of the story. So in 1917. Next slide, please, Derek. So parodies are those that most closely imitate the work which they mock. This requires careful attention to detail, and as a result, parodies can be best appreciated, as I said, by a niche audience. So the more detail that something includes, the closer it is to the material, the funnier it is to us, because it's almost like a straight man in a joke. It becomes funnier and funnier because we appreciate the authority of the original material and what the parodist brings to the material. So, and we feel like we're part of the in crowd. We're the group that gets it, which adds to the enjoyment. So next slide, please. The first Sherlockian parody was written by J.M. Peter Pan Barrie. Barrie describes my dinner with Sherlock Holmes. Invited to dine with Holmes at the home of Arthur Conan Doyle, Barrie one-ups him with his keen powers of observation, and Holmes leaves in a huff. When Barrie's parody was published in, there's no comma after speaker, I have to say that, in Speaker magazine in November of 1891, no more than 5 Holmes stories have been published. Study in Scarlet and Sign of War had also been published. And I read the parody, and it is funny. It's funny to me. And it's funny because Barry, in the story, he's himself, it's very metafiction. And he says, well, I see by your top hat that you have not been in the city recently. And Holmes is like, you cannot know that. He goes, oh, yes, I do, because. And so it's almost like this dueling banjo song from Deliverance. Dun, 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 dun. And they go back and forth, and Holmes just can't take it. He cannot take that somebody is one-upping him and he leaves. He's just done. And it's quick and it's funny, and he goes in, he tells this funny story, and he leaves. And it's even better because Barry continues the game by saying that Arthur Conan Doyle invited him to his house to meet Sherlock Holmes. And so he's perpetuating at an early time that Holmes is real, and that this happened in 1891. So we know it's really early in the whole story of Sherlock Holmes as best-selling phenomenon, that people knew enough about Sherlock Holmes to find this funny, that people weren't doing the Johnny Carson thing of why is that funny? I don't get it. So people knew what he was doing, and they knew that this was something that was intended to be humorous, and they got the joke. So next slide, please, Derek. So very many bazillions of parodies and followed Barry very early on. And if you go to the Sherlock Holmes Encyclopedia online, you can see a whole list of them. And they're just amazing. It's 1891, 1891, 1893, 1893, 1894. There's lots and lots of them. People were playing early. They loved Sherlock Holmes. The public knew who Sherlock Holmes was. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had lots of writer friends, and they started pinging on him and making fun in a loving way about Sherlock Holmes. He's such a strong character, so well done that you can use him to make jokes, you can use him to tell more stories. And so this just kept the popularity going, that people were talking about him. And this would be like social media today, that form of publishing, commenting, parodying kept the momentum going even more than if just the stories had come out. Sherlock Holmes was on the lips of the public and on the lips of other authors who could use their influence to keep the game going. So next slide, please. And of course, as Derek so nicely mentioned, parodies continue to this day. I do want to emphasize Baking Street is not a cookbook, but Derek's wonderful recipe for pancakes is in it, including the directions for high altitude. So Brigitte, you can make that up in the Alps. And so we have parodies in our book, including the one by Michele Lopez. So next slide, please. The three ingredients, like the three oranges, the three tools of the parodist are exaggeration, inversion, and trivialization. What makes a parody and what makes it funny? So let's talk, next slide, about exaggeration. Exaggeration takes an aspect of the original serious version and pushes it to the extreme. And I apologize for my Americanisms, but an example is the opening to the Colbert Report, which exaggerates conservative talk show stylings. So if you've seen our Colbert Report, he plays his game as if he really is a talk show host and gives his comedic delivery within what the rules he set for himself. And so to us, it's very funny. Next slide, please. Inversion involves flipping the terms in an accepted system of values. Good becomes bad and bad becomes good. Many of the articles in the American publication, The Onion, uses inversion as a strategy. So the most recent headline I saw was Jungle Cruise hailed as thrilling reminder to cancel Disney Plus. So you just take the opposite. But the trick is you deliver it very straight. You deliver it as if it's true, not like this is a joke. You let the person on the other end figure out that is a joke, and that way they get to play too. And that way you're together, and the person who is reading the parody or hearing the parody, understands that it's being told in a straight way, but that it's funny. And so they're part of the game. Next slide, please. Trivialization. Trivialization consists of taking a serious topic and treating it as if it is silly or insignificant. For example, Weird Al Yankovic, if you know who that is, his silly lyrics and titles for songs. Joan Jett's I Love Rock and Roll becomes I Love Rocky Road. And if you've ever seen Weird Al Yankovic, and if you haven't, you might check him out on YouTube. He just sings it, he sang Madonna's song Like a Virgin. He sang Like a Surgeon, cutting for the very first time. He always makes a joke, but he plays it off as if that's the real song. And so it's funny because you know he's making fun of something else and you get to be part of the making fun of gang. So let's see, what strategies did Michele Lopez employ? Next slide, please. Let's find out. I will read the story to you, and I hope you have read the story. It's very short, so if you have read it, please bear with me. And I'll read, you discover, and without further ado, next slide, please. Something absolutely fabulous. His Last Flower, a genius of parody, a parody of genius. So I have to take a drink of water. I'm going to read now, Derek.
Hey, Nancy, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing, and then I'm going to make it so you're the full screen so people can appreciate you reading, okay?
Hey, well, thank God I got my haircut.
There we go. And let me just go to, there we go.
All right, thank you. All right. His Last Flower, dedicated with all my love to Michele. My reading by Michele Lopez, BSI, USIH. It was 9 o'clock in the evening upon the 2nd of August, the most appetizing August in the history of the world. One might have thought that God's blessing hung over the city, for there was an awesome hush and a feeling of vague expectancy in the fragrant air. The two famous German bakers stood beside the railing, with the green expanse of Regent's Park behind them, and they looked down upon the long street with a singularly suited name, on which Von Brot had opened his bakery 4 years before. A remarkable man, this Von Brot, a man who could hardly be matched among all the devoted agents of the Bäckerei. It was his talents which had first recommended him for the English mission, the most important mission of all. But since he had taken it over, those talents had become more and more manifest to the baker's dozen people in the world who were really in touch with the truth. One of these was his present companion, Baron von Pretzel, the chief secretary of the Bäckerei. So far as I can judge the trend of events, you will probably be back in Berlin within a week, the secretary was saying. When you get there, my dear Von Brot, I think you will be surprised at the welcome you will receive. I happen to know that a great reception in your honor has already been prepared. Von Brot laughed. We must not count our rolls till they're out of the oven, he remarked. The gem of my collection is still to come, though the setting is all ready for it. Mrs. Hudson's secret recipe? Yes, and it's about time too. But thanks to my checkbook and the good Altamont, all will be well tonight. The Baron looked at his watch and gave a guttural exclamation of disappointment. Well, I really can wait no longer. You can imagine that things are brewing at present in Cauldron Terrace, and that we all have to be at our posts. I'd hoped to be able to bring news of your great coup. Did Altamont name no hour? Von Brot pushed over a telegram. We'll come without fail tonight and bring a bottle of Tokay. Altamont. Tokay, eh? You see, he poses as a wine merchant and I keep a full cellar. In our code, everything likely to come up is named after some vine. If he talks of a Burgundy, it is yeast. Of a Chianti, it is flour, and so on. Today is the final prize, Mrs. Hudson's sourdough recipe. By the way, what do you give him? £500 for this particular job. Of course, he has a salary as well. The greedy rogue. They are useful, these traitors, but I grudge them their money. I grudge Altamont nothing. He is a wonderful worker. No one else would have dared to steal that recipe in the very same house where once lived the greatest detective in Europe. But he has retired, hasn't he? Somewhere in the south of England, I believe. True, he is gone, but you can rest assured that he has taught one or two things to his landlady about protecting her secrets. It's been no easy job, I tell you. That recipe is guarded like the Bank of England. Well, I must be off. We shall expect you early tomorrow. And when you get that recipe through the little door on the Duke of York steps, you can put a triumphant fini to your record in England. If all that good recipe promises us come true, there will be no other bakeries than ours within the year, and the English markets will be under our control. Au revoir, Von Brot. Von Brot walked slowly down the street to his shop, now closed for the night. He entered, opening the side door with his key, and he set himself to work. There was a good deal of tidying up to do. He mustn't leave any compromising document behind. Soon, however, he was interrupted by a sharp rap on the side door. Instantly, he gave an exclamation of satisfaction and hurried out to open it. A hansom had stopped in front of the shop, and a man had stepped out of it and advanced swiftly toward him. Well? Asked Von Brot eagerly, coming forward to meet his visitor. For answer, the man waved a small brown paper parcel triumphantly above his head. You can give me the glad hand tonight, mister, he cried. I'm bringing home the bacon at last. The recipe? Same as I said in my cable, the recipe and a sample of the ingredients, every last one of them. It's the real goods, and you can lay to that. The newcomer had entered the shop and stretched his long arms. He was a tall, gaunt man of 60, with clear-cut features and a small goatee beard, which gave him a general resemblance to the caricature of Uncle Sam. He held the small parcel in his hand, but made no motion to give it up. Well, said Von Brot. What about the dough, he asked. The what? The mixture, the batter, the paste. That page, Billy, turned damn nasty at the last. I had to square him with an extra sovereign. It would have been nitsky for you and me. Von Brot smiled. Mr. Altamont, you'll get your 500 pounds for this particular job, provided that what you have brought me is a true recipe and a sample of Mrs. Husband's special sourdough. But since we are to be on such terms, said he, I don't see why I should trust you any more than you trust me. Do you understand? He added, taking a pocketbook out of his coat pocket. Here's your banknotes, ready. I claim the right to examine that parcel before you pick the money up. The man passed it over without a word. Von Brot undid a winding of string and 2 wrappers of paper. Then he sat gazing for a moment in silent amazement at a small blue book which lay before him. Across the cover was printed in golden letters, Practical Handbook of Bread Making. Only for one instant did the master baker glare at this strangely irrelevant inscription. The next, he was gripped at the back of his neck by a grasp of iron, and a chloroform sponge was held in front of his writhing face. Another tartlet, Watson? Said Sherlock Holmes as he extended the canapé platter. A thick-set man sitting by the table agreed with some eagerness. It is a great snack, Holmes. A remarkable effort on Mrs. Hudson's part, Watson. Our friend upon the sofa was ready to pay me 500 pounds for the recipe of this delicacy. Might I trouble you to open the window? For chloroform vapor does not help the palate. They were in their old sitting room at 221B Baker Street, a few doors from Von Brot's bakery. The 2 friends had brought the still unconscious former spy up the 17 steps and tied him securely. We need not hurry ourselves, Watson. We are safe from interruption. Would you mind touching the bell? There is no one in the house except Billy, who has played his part to admiration. I got our German friend here to understand that Billy was the mole, ready to sell the information he was after. Ah, Billy, you will be glad to hear that all is well. The fresh and smiling face of the page had appeared in the doorway. Glad to hear it, Mr. Holmes. Mrs. Hudson left another platter of her special tartlets for you and Dr. Watson before she went to the country this afternoon, sir. Shall I bring it up? Maybe later, Billy. You can use a bite to eat yourself. Well, Watson, he said, I've hardly seen you in the light yet. What lot suits you? I think that you have put on 7.5 pounds since I saw you a couple of years ago. 7, Holmes. Well, a half a pound more after this refreshment, certainly, chuckled Holmes. But last I heard of you, you were busy among your bees and you were writing a book about bee culture in your farm upon the South Downs. Exactly, Watson. But I spent the last few months on an editing job. He picked up the volume from the table and read out the whole title. Mrs. Hudson's Practical Handbook of Bread Making, with some observations upon the preservation of the mother dough. Behold the fruit of many laborious days in the kitchen from our former landlady, the greatest cook and baker in London, a textbook which focuses the whole art of bakery into one volume, obviously without the secret family recipe. But how did you get to work again? Well, the fact is, Watson, that this gentleman upon the sofa was a bit too good for our people. He was in a class by himself. He was a master baker, and he was the only one who could bring on this master coup in industrial espionage. Strong pressure was brought upon me to look into the matter. It has cost me 2 years, Watson, but they have not been devoid of excitement. When I say that I started my pilgrimage at Barcelona, where I learned the art of the tapas, graduated in an Italian traditional bakery in Florence, gave serious trouble in a boulangerie in Dijon, and so eventually caught the eye of a subordinate agent of von Brodt, who recommended me as a likely man, you will realize that the matter was complex. Since then, I have been honored by his confidence, which has allowed me to pick him as he ripened. He turned to the page. Please call a four-wheeler so we can safely deliver Mr. von Brodt to Scotland Yard. As to you, Watson, you bear every sign of the busy medical man, so some more refreshment would not be out of place. Bring that other platter upstairs, Billy, if you don't mind. So, bravo, bravo, Michele. So Michele is here. I'm so excited. And I thought we would talk about why is this funny and what did he do that makes it so niche funny for us. So one question I have is, if you have heard the story now, one of the things that impressed me about what Michele did is he transferred a lot of the story into a different set of Sherlockian cues to make it extra funny to us. For example, can you think of an example? I'll give one. Martha becomes Billy the Page. Why would that be funny to us? Why is it funny? Unmute yourselves, please, and join in. Why did you pick Billy, Michele?
Well, if I tell you I don't know, it's not an acceptable answer. No, but seriously, as you said, it's a bit of a game of inversion. Actually, the first idea was to make it a story based mostly on puns. So playing with words, it was the original. The original inspiration was I was looking for passages in the stories connected with, which could be connected with baking, and what about the dough was the starting point. So that was a double meaning. It could easily lend itself to a pun. So the dough, both in the same of money, of course, as it is intended in the original stories, but what it was taking literally. So from here, the idea of introducing Mrs. Hudson and the secret recipe, and from there, of course, the idea of writing a sort of parody of course, of his last ball was pretty much straightforward. That was that was easy. Most of the story was already written because I simply changed some context, and grafting in some passages from other stories, which seemed to me to fit in nicely in this new theme.
So what was one of the other parts that you put in the story?
Like I don't know, just in the final, like Holmes that says to that sees Watson like the original in Scandal in Bohemia, and says that, well, what suits you, you've put on weight, and said, okay, you can put in a bit more weight now, eating the delicacies of our former landlady, and so
Right, you
on.
pulled that out of another story, in other words, to use
Sorry?
it. In other words, you pulled that out of another story other than his
Of course,
style. You
yeah.
use it related to baking, which made it.
I was tempted to use another of saying that the Holmes knew 140 different varieties of flour, but luckily I didn't do it, and that was. And but it was fun because unknown to me, my friend Enrico was writing another story, a recipe actually for carrot salmon, and which is I think immediately after my story in the book or later on. And so they use, of course, they use the trick of the 140 varieties of curry for the curried salmon. And of course, Holmes is an expert at that too. So yeah, I think that kind of transposition, our familiar, our knowledge of familiar passages from Holmes stories put in another context, of course, sound funny. I simply try to make it a whole, a coherent whole with the theme of baking. I don't agree that it was, sorry, I certainly don't agree it was genius. It was simply a humorous idea. And if you find it funny, then I'm glad.
Larry, did you want to add
Well,
something?
I guess I wanted to point out that one of my favorite lines from his last bow is when Sherlock Holmes holds up the book about beekeeping and says, "Behold the fruits of pensive nights and laborious days." And so when I saw the word laborious in there, I thought, I immediately connected with that and I knew what he was talking about and referencing. But yeah, the more you know, whatever the thing that sticks with you the most about Sherlock Holmes and his last bow is the stuff that you get. It's like it's almost like you feel like you're part of the inside joke, sort of, with parodies. So that worked well for me.
So one of the reasons I think it's such a great parody is that the material that Michele picked was strong. So the parodist picked something good. So it started out good. Then the parodist was really good at it. So we're like, oh, that's good. Oh, that's good. He's really good at that. And so we get to enjoy it both as an entertainment and as appreciating somebody else's skill, like the Olympics. People do the Olympics and they make the landing and you go, oh, that was pretty good. And that's the same thing here with Michele, as we thought he did a good job of this. I know enough to know some of those in jokes, and I know he did a good job. So it makes you feel like almost in a sort of a standing out of it, coming back into it way. So you get to enjoy it in several different ways, which I think is what makes something funny and good. Is you're invited in. When we laugh at something or chuckle, we're part of it. And when we're like, what? Then we're not part of it, but we're definitely in. And so I especially liked that he would pick little words and little cues from other stories and put them in so we could further, it was even better. It was sort of like a really good cake recipe. Margie, when Margie came to me, this was Margie's brainchild. And I was the second in command. I've edited other anthologies before. So I was kind of like we'll send out these letters, we'll do this, we'll do that. And Margie was definitely the creative force behind this. And a couple times we'd have to stop and discuss the parameters of the anthology to each other. Like, does this count? Would this be okay? Is this legal to have in this book? And because it's very different, it's very inclusive. And it's not funny to me that this is an anthology I worked on, because one year I was one of top 5 miscellaneous novels. So that's my thing. It's miscellaneous and weird and not quite well-defined. This is well-defined and you get it right away. So that's why I appreciate this so much. Would anybody like to have some comments about it? What about you Brit people? You Brit people who I was too shy to say my accents in front of, whom I was too shy to say my accents in front of.
Are you asking for comments on the story?
Yeah, comments on the story or process or parodies or other Sherlockian parodies. How do you know when, did you like this story? And
yes, it was very clever.
Thank you, Robin.
Very clever.
Thank
And
you.
I have to say special kudos to Michele, because it was done in a language that it's not his mother tongue. And it's already difficult to write in another language, and even more difficult to have humor in another language. And to have it pass, it means it was a really good job.
Yeah, that's impressive.
What's
Yes,
more, there were some
saying it.
bilingual jokes in there.
Sorry?
kudos for getting like a bilingual joke in there, because I looked up the name of the spy, von Braut, and
Oh, yeah,
Braut is the German word for loaf.
Of course, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
That was
And
definitely,
pretzel.
yeah,
Yeah, I
of course.
missed that
Yeah.
joke. I didn't know that.
That was deliberate, yes, because I found something that connected with bread. And then, okay, bark. Oh, German for bread is Brot. Okay, that could work, and so I put that in.
Yeah, that's great.
That was one of my,
Yeah, but I knew it was you were doing an offshoot of von Bork. But
right.
of course, that's as far as I got the joke.
Yeah,
But
so right
didn't
away,
get the Von
right
Braut
away,
part.
you know, yeah, right
Yeah.
away, you know it's a parody.
Right. All right.
Mr.
I was just
Newman,
gonna jump in and just say, like, Nancy's right that when they pitched this book to me and Brian, and it was, you know, it was very well defined around the theme of baking, but it was a very, very broad book. I mean, you could do so much with it.
Right.
And like for me, I ended up just kind of writing a piece about how I came up with this particular recipe. And then I did include the recipe in the book, even though this isn't a cookbook. You know, Michele did the parody. And so I was just curious to Michele and to maybe even some of the others that are on who are in the book, how you came up, how you decided that with that theme of baking, how did you take that theme and create your piece? So maybe Bridget, how did you come up with yours?
Yeah, call on people. Go ahead.
Well, I had 2 or 3 ideas when it was proposed to me. Actually, it was Margie and Nancy who reached out for me, and I was, oh my God, they're asking me why. But it was really, really great. And I came up with 2 or 3 ideas that I discussed with them by email. And in the end, it seemed that the idea of the journey was the most appealing, because at first I thought, I mean, I am the Swiss Sherlockian, so my rings, it was, well, pretty obvious actually. And so I could say, well, I can write something on it. And then it was maybe too specific and not as appealing as other ideas, like the last one I came up with, and that was approved by Nancy and Margie. And anyway, I could put a bit about meringues in that. So in the end, ideas were not lost completely to the original one. The idea of the journey, it is because, well, it was something I did recently. And so I said, let's start with something practical, something concrete I did lately. And it was the journey that I did with some Sherlockians from Meiringen to Florence. And then you just start thinking how it would be like for Holmes to get what it could need. He has to travel, it has to be practical, it has to be nutritious as well, not perishable. I mean, everybody who ever went hiking knows how this works. And so I started to look upon the material and say, okay, what was available at the time? Because as I pointed out in my essay, at that time, you didn't have everything every time. I mean, now you have panettone in August. At that time, it wasn't like this. So it was this, and the idea of the journey, as I said, was nice. And also I went for sweets because I like them. And so it was an easy choice, let's say. Yeah. So, and I gave the ingredients for the sweets I put in the essay without giving the recipes, because there were just too many. And I said, people might get curious and just look them up themselves. So
nice.
That was more or less it. The idea. Then I don't know how the essay came up. I'm waiting for feedbacks from you all.
I loved it.
Well, very, very good.
Yeah, it was great. I enjoyed it very much myself too.
Good. I hope it was a success if you have somehow the curiosity of trying any of the thing I mentioned in the essay.
Robin, what about you?
My story has multiple routes, so to speak. The plot about where the ring turned up comes from Agatha Christie's The Adventure of the Christmas Pudding, where the missing jewelry turned up to be baked into the Christmas pudding. And if you're familiar with the television series of John Buchan's Hannah, that's where the idea of the bird startling Lady Fairfax and dropping the ring. And the third route is dedicated to anyone who's lost anything, like the TV remote control, and found it down the back of the settee. It's literally hiding in plain sight, but you turn the place upside down, and it's only when you go back to where you were, you realize it was there all the time.
Mhm. Well, it's very clever, Robin, and I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the injection of Sherlockian and London tropes. I've been on a couple of Robin's Sherlock Holmes walks in London. They're wonderful. It was a skilled story and very clever, and I didn't see the end coming, which is always the trick in mysteries. So, and a mystery short story is hard to do. So hats off to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jay, what about you?
Well, my explanation is rather mundane comparatively. So I actually had a kitchen fire in the last city that I was in, after which I moved out and the whole kitchen burnt out. It was quite a disaster. So it's based on that. And so yeah, it's like a mix of fact and fiction, of course. Or maybe Sherlock Holmes was actually there in my kitchen. Who knows?
You had a little problem in the kitchen, as I recall.
Yes.
Her whole kitchen was down.
Right.
Oh, well, it was very, very sweet, Jay, and it made me want to go drink like a fish under the table. Very funny, very sweet, and also very interesting because there were touches of India in it. And we had a very interesting discussion about the spelling of the word rum. I looked it up, and R-U-M is how it's usually spelled. If it's R-H-U-M, it's from a certain part of the world, and Jay's R-H-U-M is not legally correct. So she has like bootleg rum in her house. I don't know about you now, but yeah.
No, that's what it said on the bottle. I picked it up from Mauritius. Yeah.
But I'm wondering if the bottle is, right. So if
Well, it was from duty free, so I don't know. It's Mauritian rum from Mauritius at the airport shop in Mauritius. So
Well, it
shouldn't have been bootleg, but well.
Right, bootleg rum, but who knows? Who knows? It's probably.
Who knows? Yeah, who knows?
Well, thank you, my contributors. I see anybody else in the room who's in the book? No, but
I'm just curious also with Michele, just why did you choose a parody to write for your piece?
Simply because I had no other ideas. No, seriously, I'm not. I don't write stories. Usually, I write the essays generally, and so when I was proposed to be to be part in this anthology, it was too good an offer. It was an offer I could not refuse, and and so I didn't have much time, and to do the research work needed to do some serious essay about Sherlock Holmes and baking, like Brigitte did, for example. I didn't have the time for that, so I said, well, I could try my hand at the story. What could I do? And so from that, the idea of writing perhaps a short parody pretty much came from that. It was, well, let's try it. It might work. And so, as I said, as I was searching for inspiration, the catchphrase was "What about the doll?" And so that was it, pretty much. It was already written, so a good part of the job had already been done by a certain Dr. Watson, his literary agent. So it was simply mostly a cut and paste job, and so doing research, even Sherlockian research, is a bit often of a cut and paste job, apart from some original ideas. So it was the kind of thing that I am in a sense used to do. what I was going to say before when you told me how it's not easy to write something in a language that is not your own and to be humorous in a language that is not your own. Well, being the company of Sherlockians, you learn to be humorous, and so since we of course speak English, and it's a great school because there are let's say one of two fellas who are one or two, meaning dozens of, of fellows given to the noble art of puns, especially, and jokes and playing with words. So it's a great learning experience. So I've had, if you find it humorous, it's because I've had good teachers, the company you keep, and in the company of Sherlockians, you learn these things.
No, it's funny. We had two different authors. One said, well, I don't have a lot of time, so I'll write a story. And another writer said, well, I don't have a lot of time to write a story, so I'll write an article.
Depends on what's your strong skills, I suppose.
Well, what Michele is not telling you is that he's very good in rewriting things. In one of our last Strand magazines of Uno Studi Norms, he rewrote the beginnings, so the incipits of famous novels, but as Watson would write them, or Sherlockian themed incipits. And they are brilliant. You should all learn Italian just to read that.
Some of them can be done in English too.
You
Some
see?
of them work in English too. I could translate some translate, or rather keep the originals. It's rather like the idea, how would this Sherlock Holmes story be the beginning if it had been written by some other famous author. So I took.
I'd buy that.
Sorry?
I'd buy that book.
No, well, it's not a book. It's short, like 4 or 5 pages, but some of them work. I will publish some of them. Maybe the joke works for in some instances. So you liked it, Brigitte? Yeah.
Oh yes, absolutely. They were absolutely brilliant. And
then we'll have to make it public. Okay. Well.
Yes, I'm very happy it is in our magazine.
With Italian translation, but it works even better with some originals. So okay, sooner or later we'll do it.
Okay.
2 of the biggest Sherlock Holmes publishers are in this room right now.
Yeah.
So you've got it said.
No, it's
Somebody's
right?
going to have a deal.
An article in a magazine.
You got options.
Yeah.
Larry points out that sometimes it's hard to know, is this a parody or a pastiche? To me, the rule is if they're playing it straight, it's, to me, the parody would be the topmost part of that. So,
but it's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah.
Solar Ponds is considered a great pastiche, and yet in the first introduction, they talk about how he's got a little twinkle in his eye to let us know that he knows that we know he's not Sherlock Holmes,
right,
etc. And so it's difficult. And Darleth would bring in characters that were parodies of Fu Manchu into his Solar Pond stories, parodies of Hercule Poirot. He was sort of doing kind of a parody in a way, but we think of it as one of the great pastiche collections.
Well, and I mean, even in Doyle's work, there's so much great humor. I mean, The Red-Headed League is almost like a parody. It's one of the best stories because the way that they just make fun of Jabez Wilson is hilarious.
Oh yeah.
Funny, but what is it making fun of? See, I would say that's not really a parody. I would say that.
I think it's making fun of certain types of people in that particular case.
Okay, maybe. But is that a parody? Well, maybe it is.
Right. At least it's humorous. We can at least go that far. Right.
It is funny, no doubt about that.
Let me switch to gallery view here. Okay. Well, my friends, we're almost out of time. As always, it keeps going and going, and then suddenly, boom, we're at the end. So another big round of applause for Nancy for her talk today, and also for McKelly for allowing us to discuss this story, and for having Nancy read it. And this was awesome. As always, I learned so much from these talks, and I get so much out of them that it's one of the highlights of every month.
Yeah.
Before I forget, just give me 1 sec to show us, hold on, that, let me just share my screen to introduce that next month's speaker is going to be Bonnie Mcbird is going to be our speaker next month. She's going to send us an excerpt of the 3 Locks. And if you don't know Bonnie Mcbird, another huge Sherlock Holmes writer, not always, she used to write mainly for movies. She wrote the movie Tron, that's one of her big ones. And then she's kind of become a Sherlock Holmes writer as well. She's written this novel series. The 3 Locks is the most recent in the series, which is a series just called A Sherlock Holmes Adventure. And so she'll talk about that, her latest book, and the series in September. Okay, so it'll be Saturday, September 4th will be our next meeting. Okay, I guess depending on where you are in the world, September 4th is where it is in my time zone at least. So, all right, any last comments before we wrap up?
Well,
Thank you all very, very much.
yeah.
Thank you.
And Steve put it down on there that Bonnie lives 1 block from Baker Street. So very cool.
There we go.
Excellent.
She wrote an article for our Baking Street book about Baker Street and what's on Baker Street, and Martha Stewart of Victorian Baking, who was not Mrs. Beaton.
Oh.
Yeah, actually, it's a great article.
Yes.
It's like everything in this book, very, very interesting book. Great. All right, everyone. Thank you. And I know I'm behind on posting these recordings online, but I'm going to try to make an effort to get a lot of them up this weekend. And I'll get this one up because I had a couple of people going to Scintillation Science who wanted to see this recording. So I will go ahead and get this up as soon as possible. Once again, thank you, everyone, and have a great month and stay safe, and see you in September. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek.
Thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Right.